Duke discriminated against white and Asian applicants to meet race-based outcomes for its incoming classes. That led to Black and Hispanic students being substantially more likely to be admitted to Duke Law School.
Hey, so what this elite law school is accused of doing is kind of insane. Hey guys, welcome back to the show, your home for independent and nonpartisan commentary and analysis on politics, media, internet, culture, and more. We've got a fascinating story from the world of higher education / the federal government, which are constantly beefing these days with the Trump administration in charge in D.C., because the Trump administration has just levied some pretty serious accusations at a major elite law school, Duke Law, that they say, and these are just their allegations, is still or has still discriminated against Asian and white applicants, even after the Supreme Court ruled that affirmative action was unconstitutional and was supposed to stop. The allegation here is that Duke said, "Hold my beer," and essentially kept doing it. Let's watch some coverage, and then we'll get into more details.
On note 4, the Justice Department is accusing Duke University of using racial discrimination in its law school admissions program.
The DOJ says Duke discriminated against white and Asian applicants to meet race-based outcomes for its incoming classes. The department says that led to Black and Hispanic students being substantially more likely to be admitted to Duke Law School. The Trump administration has made it a priority to identify schools allegedly discriminating against students based on race.
Yeah, look, I supported the Supreme Court's decision when this all came down. I believe in meritocracy and equality. I think all students, Black, white, gay, non-binary, what have you, should be graded and evaluated based on their merits and treated the same. And there should be the exact same standards for everybody. That's not a fringe opinion. In fact, that's what most Americans, including large percentages of different minority populations, actually believes. But for years, elite universities, and I guess law schools as well, engaged in essentially discrimination. They put their thumb on the scale in favor of applicants of some races, which necessitates putting it against others. And so Asian people were actually the biggest victims of this. They faced the harshest penalty and were disproportionately denied spots they deserved on the merits of their SAT scores and GPA and other things at elite universities, but also white people were downgraded or discriminated against, or however you want to phrase it, as well. And this was supposed to come to a stop, but a lot of people, myself included, worried at the time that even though the Supreme Court handed down this ruling, universities would find sneaky ways to keep doing this kind of thing, because they're just so deeply wedded to this idea that they've got to have X percentage of Black students or what have you, rather than just make sure you're not discriminating against anybody, but then just taking the best students you get, whatever their race may be. Whether that's 10% Black or 90% Black, I would support it. So more details here from the Wall Street Journal about the allegations against Duke that they say just has continued to do this in an underhanded manner. And some of the data that they have here is really stark. So if it's correct, I don't know how Duke is going to beat these allegations, but let's go through this from the Wall Street Journal. 3 years after university racial preferences were struck down by the Supreme Court, they've reemerged in stealthier form. The Wall Street Journal editorial board writes, late last week, the Justice Department told Duke University Law School that a compliance review has found its admissions violate the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Quote, Duke Law continues to intentionally discriminate, including, quote, in the incoming classes of 2023, 2024, and 2025, says a letter signed by Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon. She cites internal school communications and policies that, quote, reflect a sustained determinative emphasis on racial diversity in admissions and a deliberate effort to preserve racial outcomes. So, I mean, it sounds like she has access to their internal communications, which oftentimes they say the quiet part out loud in these echo chambers or in these admissions committees. They sometimes are, unfortunately for them, a little too honest about what they're doing, though they have tried to change that a little bit since the Supreme Court ruling. Anyway, more from the Journal here. The Supreme Court's 2023 ruling in Students for Fair Admissions was supposed to stop colleges from picking students based on race, but admissions offices have looked for ways to circumvent it. Ms. Dillon says Duke law encourages applicants to dilate on their backgrounds and, quote, those variables were used to advance racial diversity goals and thereby operate as material race-related proxies. So what their allegation is that Duke essentially found a way to figure out the races and highlight that, have people highlight them, and then biased towards having more students of some races anyway. And frankly, when you look at the data here, if these data are correct, I don't know how Duke could be anything other than guilty as sin, really. Back to the journal here. So test scores also undercut the idea that Duke law lets in students without race as a criterion. Ms. Dillon says that in 2024, the median LSAT score for admitted Black students was 164, which is the 84th percentile. And for Hispanics, it was 170, the 95th percentile. But for Asian students, the median test score was 173, the 98th percentile. And for white students, it was 172, the 97th percentile. So when you look at LSAT scores, which is the legal version of the SAT that you have to take to get into law school, and it's like the single biggest determination factor in whether you get into law school, if you were Black, you could get in the 84th percentile. Meaning that your score puts you at like 84th in the ranking of 100 people or 100%. It's like you did better than 84% of the test takers. But if you're white, you have to be in the 97th percentile for the average student, or median rather. That's crazy. That's not normal. If you or your child spent years growing up on social media and experienced serious mental health issues, you should hear this. Recently, a jury ordered Meta and YouTube to pay millions for their role in designing and promoting addictive platforms. They knew their apps could contribute to anxiety, depression, and body image issues, but did not share those risks while prioritizing profits. The recent historic verdict underscores the consequences of those decisions. Now, Morgan & Morgan is stepping up to hold these platforms accountable for the harm they caused. Click the link in my bio to take a short quiz, as you may be entitled to a potential recovery of over $1,000. Now back to the show. If you were actually evaluating students on an equal basis, you wouldn't expect the numbers to be literally the same, right? It might not come out perfectly, but it'd be within a couple percentages of each other for the medians of the different racial groups. You would be accepting students generally that have a score of 95th percentile. And then for the racial groups, it would be all around that for the median, right? This is a stark difference that it really is impossible to explain without racial preferencing, if this data is all accurate. Anyway, here's more even damning data from the allegations from Harmeet Dillon. Quote, notably, Ms. Dillon continues, median LSATs of denied Asian and white applicants in 2024 to 2025 exceeded the median LSATs of admitted Black applicants. Wow. Wow. Can we just unpack that for a second? What she's saying is that the median of LSAT, the test score of white and Asian students that were denied, is higher than the median of Black students that were admitted. That's crazy, by the way. Anyway, more from the journal. When accounting for test scores and undergraduate grades, the Justice Department suggests, quote, Duke law's use of race gave a Black applicant a roughly 3.5 times higher probability of admission than an equally strong Asian applicant. Sorry, but if those data are correct, that is indefensible and looks damning as hell. And it is so incredibly unfair that this was done, certainly in the past. We know that it was done, and it seems like it's still being done at Duke, that you, because of your skin color or ethnicity as an Asian person, are multiple times less likely to get in than a person with the same accomplishments as you who is Black. How is that anything other than racist? Also, again, even most Black people actually prefer to be judged on their own merits rather than given this kind of condescending preferential treatment. And you only set students up for, I think, larger rates of failure or struggling when you put them into universities that they could not get into in a meritocratic process. Also, it unfairly tars. Actually, like there are, I'm sure, because these are just medians, right? So I'm sure there are lots of qualified Black students who got into Duke and would have gotten in even just under a fair system that was race neutral. But those students might have been viewed by their classmates as, well, sus, did he get affirmative action? Right? That's a super unfair label in many cases that gets applied to people because of these sort of divisive systems. And all it does is reinforce these racial separations and tensions and everything. And I just think it's such an awful, awful system that was so clearly biased and divisive and immoral. But they're so deeply wedded to it in academia, this kind of identitarian progressivism and obsession with like equity over equality. Affirmative action is the best example of what it looks like when you prioritize equity over equality. And it's ugly. It's actually really ugly. So whenever you hear people say that, remember the examples like this, or at least how it seems. Duke obviously denies this, and we'll have the chance to dispute it if they ultimately face a case against them over it. But look, if those data are accurate, I don't know how you get away from some of these accusations. Final bit from the Journal here. Ms. Dillon told the law school she wants a voluntary resolution to bring the school into compliance. A Duke spokesman said last week the university is reviewing her letter and is, quote, committed to complying with the law and will continue to do so in a manner that is consistent with our academic mission. Interesting comment there. I also think it maybe adds a layer to this of like diabolical nature that it's law schools actively, and also Duke is like an elite law school. It's like a top 10 law school, actively, allegedly circumventing the law to continue this divisive and discriminatory practice. Wow. It's like that's even worse than just a random college doing it, because these are, I don't know if admissions personnel at a law school are actually lawyers themselves, but, you know, a lot of the people that run the university are, and they're supposed to be committed to the law and the rule of law and upholding those values in their legal education. And yet you have them trying to circumvent Supreme Court rulings, allegedly here. Yikes. All to preserve a system that like everybody hates, or at least the vast majority of the population hates and thinks is divisive and counterproductive. I don't understand why they can't let it go. But these are issue areas where I do think the Trump administration is on positive ground, and assuming everything they're saying is correct and accurate here, is in the right. And so I'm not going to, just because I'm very critical of a lot of other stuff they're doing, I'm not going to pretend they're wrong about this if they're, at least as far as I can tell, not. If they're on the right side of history and the right side of this important issue. And people need to remember how many people were wronged by this. Like the Asian American community in particular. Ask them, even liberal or progressive leaning ones on otherwise, they really feel this acutely, because they particularly, white people were as well, but even more strongly, really harshly discriminated against and excluded because of their race. And that is so, and this is in the extremely modern era. Right? We're not talking about like, oh, well, my grandparents lived under Jim Crow. We're talking about like, oh, well, I didn't get into Harvard and my whole life changed and I went to a different university. And if I had been a different race, I would have. Like, that's a life-altering potential act of discrimination that was done to countless thousands of people, all in the name of like woke people, of the tolerant and progressive ones. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. It always was. But the accountability, it's like, we're not actually going to do the AOC thing where she just says, oh, woke one was crazy. No, actually, we're going to hold y'all accountable for this stuff. And shout out to the Trump administration on this one for seeking to do exactly that. I don't know, guys. You'll have to let me know what you think, especially if you're somebody who was impacted by affirmative action at any point, or maybe went to Duke Law School. I'd be curious to hear from you. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. If you aren't yet, do hit the like button and do consider becoming a channel member now. It's the best way to support my independent-minded commentary in this crazy, hyper-partisan and hyper-tribalistic world of political content. Hit the join button or click the link in the description. And with that, guys, we'll leave it there for this one and be back with more real soon.